on a center. Offensive linemen are the most replaceable pieces in the game of football. And I'm like, okay, buddy, well, everybody in town is sure appreciating Alex Mack and what he can do right now. So go ahead and tell me that. But that's a great point, Bruce. There was a ton of media in town that said, this is nuts. Let this guy take a hike, man. We don't pay that kind of money to a center. Only a bad team like Cleveland. I remember getting into it with a guy who told me it sums up what kind of team Cleveland is, that they would think about spending that kind of money on a center, and it proves it, because the only other team dumb enough to do it was Jacksonville, who offered him a large amount of money too. And I'm like, okay, well, I think that it just shows how much you don't know about the game of football, and it's being proven now.
Well, there's two parts of that discussion. Part of it is you do have to, if you're looking ahead, if you're a general manager or if you're just a salary cap guy, you have to allocate a certain amount of assets for each position. And obviously, most NFL teams, value certain positions higher than others. And obviously, center is not valued as highly as say, quarterback, left tackle, pass rusher, maybe lockdown corner. But, when, as I said, and I've said on this show for weeks, the two best players on the Browns happen to be offensive linemen.
Mack and Thomas.
The two best pure football players on the team. You don't want to, you never want to lose people that have grown in your system and turn into Pro Bowl level players. That's what you want to build on, and you want to build the foundation. And the fact is that when you don't have, you're always looking to improve. No team in the NFL, even the best teams, have every single player they want at every single position. You try to build and you try to get better, and certainly when you're at with a position where you have Thomas and Mack, you're not going to look to move on from that. You're going to look to improve the players around them at those other more high-profile positions. But again, this is to me, it's another indicative of the power of fantasy football. It's like offensive linemen don't exist, and in the world of fantasy football, they don't exist. In the world of real football, you don't get fantasy points unless you have offensive linemen.
That's it.
Because you can't do anything offensively if you don't have those guys blocking up front.
Yeah, go ask Darren McFadden how many yards he has without the offensive line's help this season. Go ask DeMarco Murray. Go ask any of them, anybody, and they'll tell you. But I agree with you. And where my point with that more is that I agree with you. To a certain level, there is a budget that you set for those positions. I believe that the reason that I thought it was okay not to spend that money on any center, but to spend it on Alex Mack is because he is, I think there's obviously, and you and I have talked about it, there's a difference when you're talking top 2 or 3 at your position of everybody, and then the rank and file. It's like when you're talking quarterbacks. You got that handful of elite, and then everybody else is in a different grouping, and they can separate a little bit, but you get a lot more bunched together, and it's the same way there, clearly. But nothing speaks to his value on this team more than the last 2 weeks. It speaks for itself. And I'll tell you what, the Browns, luckily for them, they did lock him up, because if they were under the franchise and he was going to be renegotiating again, his agent is bringing the last 2 weeks statistical lines, and he's just going to lay that piece of paper in front of the Browns and go, here, guys, tell me how much money we're worth. I'm just saying. Tell me how much money we're worth, but we'll see, man. And the Browns, I'm with you though, for the most part. John McMullen from the Sports Network talking some Browns. Let's talk about the rest of the games around the NFL here. Start in the division. We brought up a few of them already. Man, Baltimore, Cincinnati, great game. And the end of it was just amazing, man. The way Cincinnati comes back, boom. You think, oh, wow, good job by the Bengals there. Oh, you left some time on the clock. Here come the Ravens. First off, I know there was often that he was allowed to catch that ball and then maneuver his way to the end zone with it. And luckily for the Bengals, they got called back for the offensive pass interference. But, man, what a crazy end to that one.
Yeah, and, that's the kind of player Steve Smith is. He's been doing it for a long time, and when we talk about great off-season acquisitions, he's at the top of the list because he's done amazing things, especially at his age for the Ravens. But that was clearly a push-off. And, you know, I'm kind of happy they called it, only because, obviously, with the points of emphasis and everything skewed towards offense, they rarely call out the offensive players for doing that, whereas, you know, they call the defensive backs for breathing on the receivers at certain points. But it was offensive pass interference. It should have been called, and I think they got that one right. I know a lot of people are calling the D-back out for the flop, but clearly his arms were extended. And, you know, I think Drew Pearson, for old-school football fans, is about the only guy in Steve Smith's corner today. Because that was clearly offensive pass interference.
I agree. It was clearly offensive pass interference. I also agree that he did flop as well. So, but it doesn't matter because it was still. But it was like, wow, he made sure they saw that one. Like, hey, take a look. You just shoved me over here. But
sometimes you have to.
I
mean, they don't call it. As, you know, so something we constantly. How many times do you see the receiver
drives me nuts
after an incomplete pass? How many times do you see him hit the ground and immediately look around at every official and beg for the flag? And more often than not, they get it. So,
John, you notice though,
I have a tough time feeling bad for receivers.
You brought that up. You notice it's not. That is one of the things I hate most about the current NFL. It's not even just the receivers, although they're the kings of it. It's every player. It seems like at the end of every player, their first reaction is, "I'm surprised they don't get more strained necks," because they start craning their neck around, throwing their arms up like, I can't believe there wasn't a flag on that play. Laying on the ground, looking for the flag. You're like, man, you weren't even in the play and you're looking for a flag. No, but that seems to be the new thing is to, pitch. But, yeah, it drives me nuts with the wide receivers because they can't hit the ground without getting up. Where's the flag? Making that little flag signal. And you're like, man, just go play your game, man. Come on. But,
I got news for you. I disagree because if I was a coach, I would be teaching that. I would be teaching that as a competitive advantage because it works. And as long as the NFL fosters that environment, and they have fostered it by this ridiculous way they're calling this game, I can't blame the receivers. I cannot blame them at all, because it works. And as long as it continues to work, one of the reasons it's so difficult to win on the road in the NFL these days, especially when you're facing a good team, is that reason. Because the minute you see an incomplete pass, what's the first thing that happens? The crowd starts going, chanting. And then the receiver puts up his arms, and then the official who just looked at the play and saw no pass interference says, I must have missed it, and threw the flag. It happens so often, and as I said, if I was a coach, I would be teaching my players to do it.
And I hear that.
That's
you know
how
what?
bad it has gotten.
Well, here's how bad it's gotten, because what they do on that level goes everywhere else. 2 weeks ago, no joke, I was calling a game, and doggone it, the teams, because I do a different set of teams every week. I can't remember who it was. Regardless, I was calling a high school football game on the radio 2 weeks ago, and there was a play in the end zone, and I'm telling you, this is the NFL influence gone crazy, both on the players and the referee. There was a little bit of contact to me, it was incidental. It was just a broken up pass play in the end zone. Wide receiver lays on the ground, gets up, starts making the signal. The guys have all gotten up except for the wide receiver, who's the last one to get up, and about 15, 20, maybe 25 seconds after the play, here you see the flag come in late, and I'm like, oh, come on, man. But it was like that perfect NFL play where you're like, no flag, and then somebody just decides to throw the flag in at the last second of it, and I'm like, man, that was good defense. But it was like a little mini NFL scene, except on a high school level. The way the guy laid there and signaled for it, the way the official thought about it for a second, and then threw the flag. And I swear, sometimes you think they're just waiting to see if the guy catches the ball or not, and then once he sees how the play went down, then the flag comes out if he didn't make the catch or whatever. But I agree with you about coaching the guys, because it does work, clearly. I mean, everybody does. And clearly they are coaching it, because everybody gets up and does it, man. And Charles in the chat
yeah,
room
and I hate
disagrees,
it. I hate it as a fan of the game. I'm with you. I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks. I don't like the way it comes off. But at the bottom line, these people are paid to win football games, and it's a competitive advantage. So I don't blame them for doing it. And that's the NFL's fault, because they've fostered this environment. And until they change it, it's going to continue.
In the chat room, now 15-yard unsportsmanlike for every one of those. I wouldn't have a problem with that either, but you're never going to see that coming. Let's switch over. We mentioned it earlier. The other divisional team, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis. I'll tell you what, I know people may have thought this would be a good game, an exciting game, but I don't know how many people thought, that it would be the offensive explosion that it was with these two teams, especially Pittsburgh. We've seen the ups and downs they've had offensively. Defensively, we know what the Colts have done. And Andrew Luck, did his thing, but Big Ben did his thing a little bit more. An incredible day, 522 yards for him, and a 51-34 shootout there that really wasn't even as close as that. Pittsburgh just handed a whipping to the Colts.
Yeah, and we talked about that before in the huge passing numbers. And, Ben Roethlisberger became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for 500 two different times in his career. And I was just, when Norm Van Brocklin way back in the day set the record with 552, I believe, that year, consider this is how different the game is. That year, no other quarterback threw for 400 yards in a game when he set that record. Not once. 4 of them did it this week on Sunday, and Ben went over 500. So anytime you talk about these numbers, you put an asterisk on them, and we understand. But we also understand just how dominant he was on that particular Sunday, and how difficult, when a quarterback at that level is that hot, there's just not a lot you can do to stop them.
No, I agree. That was crazy. And you know what? They looked like they got furloughed for the weekend. They wore those doggone jailhouse uniforms. Those Steelers throwbacks, those are the ugliest uniforms in the history of professional sports. I'm telling you, man.
They are not pretty.
Every time I see those, I think that they're out there for Camp 8. They're putting in some work release time or something, man.
Yeah, it looks like they're about to make bigger rocks into smaller rocks.
Right,
It looks like prison guard, but
I'm telling you, I always joke. A friend of mine, we love. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence about being in prison, but we always joke. We're like, man, Claude Rains had the boys at Camp 8 out this week. Because it looks like the jailhouse. Anyways, it was just I always get a kick out of seeing them out there in those god awful uniforms, man. But they do it all the time, man. That's the stuff, you guys, that has me scared of what in the world these people will eventually come up with for the new Browns uniforms. Because I'm telling you, you can't go throwback.
Well, all you got to do is look to college and see some of those.
Yeah, Oregon.
At Oregon, Nike University, as I like to call it, to see some of the things they're wearing. But even, you've seen some of the Maryland, Notre Dame for the Shamrock series. If you ever seen some of and that's Notre Dame with the historic, gold helmets and all the tradition and some of the things they wear on those Shamrock series games. My God,
I'm telling you, man, I don't know. I mean, all the jerseys throw. Hey, I look at some of those NBA throwbacks too, but not the same. And to me, no sport, none of those can match the Bumblebee jerseys there that the Steelers wear when they do that. Hey, some of the other. You know what? This made me think of you yesterday. I mentioned it at the beginning of today's show because talking about things that are the function of today's NFL, like the 400-yard quarterbacks in one day, the Browns making those big comebacks the way they did a couple of times in the early part of the season. Same thing here with the next story. Detroit, back-to-back weeks now. First time, I believe, ever that a team came back from 14 down and then the next week from 21 down. How about the Falcons? They're up 21-0 at the half. Detroit whitewashes them in the second half, and the Falcons are just kind of free-falling here.
Yeah, they are, and that's a bad loss. But you see it all the time now. That 3 touchdown leads used to be a fait accompli in the NFL. Game was over, and that's just not the way it is anymore. That says they should have won the football game, and bad teams seem